Berkeley Square, 1933. Few people remember it now, but in 1933, Berkeley Square offered American audiences their first real taste of cinematic time travel, and not as fantasy or farce, but as a tragic romance wrapped in historical mystery. Based on the stage play Berkeley Square by John L. Balderston, adapted from Henry James's unfinished novel The Sense of the Past, the film starred a young Leslie Howard, who also helped develop the script. He plays Peter Standish, an American scientist who becomes obsessed with his ancestral home in 18th century London. Through a strange metaphysical connection never explained by machines or science, he is drawn back in time, literally trading places with his ancestor from the year 1784. But Berkeley Square is not an adventure. It is quiet, haunted, more Wuthering Heights than the Time Machine. Standish finds himself unable to fully belong to the past or return to the present. His love affair with a woman of the past, Helen, played by Heather Angel, becomes the heart of the film, and ultimately its tragedy. When he returns to his own time, he is devastated by what he has lost, a love he can never revisit. The film's tone is melancholic, dreamlike, and deeply literate. Unlike later time travel films that hinge on action or paradox, Berkeley Square is about spiritual dislocation. It asks what it means to live outside of time and whether love can bridge centuries. Critics were deeply moved. The New York Times called it a film of rare imagination and beauty. Leslie Howard earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, and the film was praised for its atmospheric set design and elegant dialogue. At the time, it was considered a quiet triumph. So why did it disappear? In part, the answer lies in its subtlety. Berkeley Square lacked the spectacle or mass appeal of other 1,932nd films. Time flies, 1944. In the midst of war-torn Europe, when the world was desperately clinging to laughter, one British production tried something wildly ambitious, a time travel musical comedy. Its title was Playful Time Flies. Its plot was absurd, and for a brief moment, it worked. Audiences chuckled, critics smiled, and the film earned a respectable reputation in its day. But despite its inventive premise and novelty, Time Flies has all but vanished, even among fans of classic science fiction or vintage musicals. Today, it's rarely screened, poorly preserved, and almost completely forgotten, which is a shame because it holds a fascinating place in the strange timeline of early time travel cinema. Directed by Walter Ford and released in 1944, Time Flies follows a group of eccentric Londoners who accidentally travel back to Elizabethan England. The journey is made possible by a time machine, invented by a bumbling professor, a clunky but charming device powered more by imagination than science. Once transported to the 16th century, the group encounters William Shakespeare, Queen Elizabeth I, and various hijinks unfold as they try to navigate a world completely foreign to them. The cast included several stars of British music halls and early talkies, including Tommy Handley, a beloved radio comedian, and Evelyn Dahl, an American-born singer popular in the UK. Their chemistry, light banter, and musical numbers gave the film its cheerful energy, even when the humor leaned into broad stereotypes or period cliches. And yet Time Flies wasn't just silly, it played with genuinely innovative ideas for the time, cultural displacement, the butterfly effect of modern knowledge in a historical world, and how the past might interpret future technology and slang. In one scene, Shakespeare is inspired to write some of his most famous lines after hearing them misquoted by the time travelers, a trope that would later appear in films like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, 1989. But here it was, used decades earlier. When released, the film was met with modest success. British newspapers called it delightfully mad, and its blend of song, satire, and speculative fiction was seen as a welcome distraction from the realities of war. Beyond the Time Barrier, 1960. In 1960, as Cold War fears crept into every corner of American life, a modest science fiction film arrived with an ominous message, one that seemed both impossible and inevitable. Beyond the Time Barrier wasn't flashy, it wasn't expensive, it wasn't even widely reviewed, but it offered something unusual for its time. A dystopian vision of the future shaped not by aliens or fantasy, but by human mistakes, war, radiation, silence, and regret. For a brief moment, it stood as a warning. Today, It barely stands at all, rarely screened, barely preserved, and mostly forgotten outside of genre circles. The film was directed by Edgar G. Ulmer, a once-renowned filmmaker best known for The Black Cat, 1934, and Detour, 1945. Ulmer had moved into the world of low-budget science fiction, working quickly and creatively with limited resources. Beyond the Time Barrier, filmed in just over a week on a shoestring budget, became one of his final notable works. The story follows U.S. Air Force pilot Major William Allison, played by Robert Clark, who flies an experimental aircraft at supersonic speed only to mysteriously vanish from radar and crash land in a strange, eerily silent future. He has crossed the Time Barrier and arrived in the year 2024, where the Earth has been devastated by a cosmic plague that has rendered most people sterile and mute. The survivors live underground in a sealed, sterile environment called the Citadel, ruled by a council and haunted by mutated outsiders above. There, Allison meets the Supreme, a high priest-like leader, a council of scientists, and the Supreme's granddaughter, a beautiful telepathic woman named Trirene, portrayed by Darlene Tompkins. As Allison tries to understand what happened to the world, he discovers that the very technology and weapons being tested in his own time contributed to the catastrophe that followed. Though its sets were sparse and its budget tiny, Beyond the Time Barrier embraced its limitations. Ulmer filmed at the Texas State Fairgrounds, using the futuristic architecture of the Dallas Centennial Building to create the Citadel's minimalist, post-apocalyptic look. The stark concrete halls and quiet corridors gave the film an eerie, otherworldly atmosphere, not unlike the later, more expensive dystopias of Logan's Run or THX 1138. Critics at the time gave it little attention. It was released as part of a double feature alongside other genre titles, marketed to drive-in theaters and B-movie fans. But some saw something deeper. A few science fiction magazines noted its unusual tone: somber, philosophical, fatalistic. The Time Travelers, 1964. In 1964, as the space race accelerated and science fiction crept into mainstream cinema, a low-budget film dared to step beyond the stars and through time. It was called The Time Travelers, and it had everything you'd expect from a mid-century sci-fi adventure: blinking machines, androids, apocalyptic futures, and even a surprise twist that left audiences blinking. It wasn't a blockbuster. It wasn't flashy, but it was smart, strange, and sincere. And for a moment, it looked like it might find a place in the growing world of American sci-fi. Then, like its own characters, it vanished into the void. The Time Travelers was directed by Ib Melchior, a Danish-American filmmaker known for imaginative storytelling on a shoestring budget. Melchior had a flair for crafting high-concept ideas with very little money, and here, he stretched every dollar. Shot mostly on studio lots and sound stages, the film followed a team of scientists who accidentally open a portal to the future, not through magic or accident, but through calculated experiment. The story begins in the present day, 1964, where a group of researchers led by Dr. Eric von Steiner, played by Preston Foster, are developing a window into the future. When one of the team members walks through the portal, they discover not just images, but a full doorway one that leads them to the year 2071. Earth, they learn, has been devastated by nuclear war. The survivors live underground, ruled by a small elite of scientists who are building a rocket to escape the dying planet and start over on another world. But the time travelers soon realize they are trapped. The portal has closed behind them, and their only hope of returning to their own era may involve a risky collaboration with the very people who seem determined to leave Earth behind. On the surface, the film plays like a traditional sci-fi adventure. But beneath the rubber suits and flickering lights, the time travelers explored ambitious themes: technological dependence, human extinction, and the paradoxes of time itself. In one scene, androids constructed to serve mankind rebel when they are told they won't be included on the space voyage. In another, a failed attempt to reopen the time portal results in an eerie glimpse of a parallel version of the same scientists already reliving the same events in a slightly altered timeline. The film ends on a surprisingly philosophical note. After returning to their own time, the scientists accelerate their own timeline so rapidly that they vanish, effectively becoming their future selves. The final shot shows their lab standing empty, their fates unresolved. It's a haunting conclusion, especially for a B-movie. Critics gave it polite nods. It wasn't dismissed, but it wasn't celebrated. The special effects achieved with camera tricks, makeup, and creative use of mirrors were clever but not revolutionary. Its stars were television regulars, not marquee names. And in a year when Dr. Strangelove and Goldfinger dominated public attention, Journey to the Center of Time, 1967. By the late 1962nd, time travel had become a recurring theme in science fiction, not yet mainstream, but no longer exotic. With the success of television series like The Twilight Zone and The Time Tunnel, audiences were growing more comfortable with paradoxes, alternate futures, and world-ending timelines. Yet when Journey to the Center of Time premiered in 1967, it arrived without fanfare. Modest, strange, and curiously ambitious, it tried to go further than its predecessors, pushing into both the past and the future, only to be pulled into obscurity. Directed by David L. Hewitt, Journey to the Center of Time was technically a remake, or more accurately, a spiritual sequel to The Time Travelers, 1964, which had gained minor cult status among science fiction fans. While none of the cast returned, and the production team was different, the themes and structure were clearly related. Both films revolved around a group of scientists experimenting with a machine that could open a gateway through time. Both ended in unsettling ambiguity, and both, ultimately, vanished from cultural memory. In this film, a group of researchers at a secretive lab operate a large, humming, time-viewing screen designed to observe the past and future, not interact with it. But when a wealthy financier pressures the team to accelerate their experiments, something goes wrong. The scientists, including Dr. Gordon, Carl, and a curious assistant named Karen, are thrown forward in time, landing in a barren wasteland shaped by nuclear catastrophe. There, they encounter a dying civilization clinging to survival amid radioactive ruins. Attempting to escape back to their own time, they overshoot the mark and end up millions of years in the past, witnessing the primordial Earth and the beginning of life. Eventually, they arrive at a moment so distant and abstract that even the concept of time begins to blur, a sequence portrayed through surreal lighting and minimalist sets. The Time Machine, 1960. In 1960, one film seemed to define what time travel could look like on screen. Lavish, imaginative, philosophical, The Time Machine wasn't just a sci-fi film. It was a bridge between the Victorian dreams of H.G. Wells and the atomic age anxieties of modern man. It won an Academy Award, thrilled audiences, and for a while stood as the definitive cinematic journey through time. And yet, despite its legacy, The Time Machine has slowly drifted into cultural quiet. It's not widely taught, it's rarely screened, and many of today's audiences know the concept, but not the film. Directed by George Pal, a pioneer of cinematic fantasy, The Time Machine was adapted from the novella by H.G. Wells, a work often credited with inventing the concept of a time machine. Pal had previously directed When Worlds Collide and produced War of the Worlds, 1953. And he approached The Time Machine not just as entertainment, but as a kind of moral fable. The film stars Rod Taylor as George, an inventor in turn-of-the-century London who creates a mechanical device capable of transporting him through time. With its gleaming brass and spinning dials, the machine itself became iconic, a physical, elegant object that would be imitated in countless homages for decades. But what makes the film endure is what George finds when he travels forward. He witnesses the rise and fall of human civilization, wars, bombs, and silence. Finally, in the distant year 802,701, he arrives in a world split between the childlike Eloi and the monstrous Morlocks. The Eloi live in passive ignorance, while the Morlocks rule underground, feeding off the weak. It's a chilling metaphor for a post-industrial society, one Pal and screenwriter David Duncan made visually striking, with eerie sound design, minimalist sets, and strong use of color and shadow. The film was praised upon release. Critics called it thoughtful, innovative, and genuinely unsettling. It won the Academy Award for Best Special Effects, recognizing the innovative time-lapse visuals that showed the passage of centuries, a sequence that still holds up for its creativity and ambition. Audiences responded too. It was a box office success, particularly with younger viewers and science fiction fans. Rod Taylor's performance, earnest and determined, helped ground the film's fantastical premise in human emotion.